kwaziwai. Yes, Mama.
It's Kanjan.
Mauya.
Yeah, just for a short while.
Makadiko mose kwaziwai muri hesa zita wangu Tanyaradzwa Masibanda Jeko Fafi Achera Nonsi. Oh, Christine kanjani? Kumuona muzukuru wangu manjenjenje kanjani as well. Makadiko mose ndinoitwa Tanyaradzwa Tawengwa nzomambano and ndiri kunzwa kufara kuno kwandiri masikati ndiri kunzwa kufara kugashirai mose pane chirongwa chedu chanhasi. Dingindira redu riri kuongorora kuti ko ndiani kwaanonzi muShona. And basa redu riri kubatwa nasekuru vangu mofu Dr. Mhoze Chikowero pamusoro isekuru. Maita basa. Tenda zvikuru. Tichibatsirwa zvakare namukoma wangu Samaita. Yes, Samaita. So hi everybody, welcome to the second installation of our Zimbabwean Scholars Symposium. Today's theme is going to be Who are the Shona? And I'm Tanyaradzwa Tawengwa. I think this is all people who know me. You all know me as the founder and CEO of the Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp and the co-founder with Vongai Shawa of the Zimbabwe Artists Collective. Bringing together, having these community discussions is so important because the core of the work that we're doing is really identity building and understanding that the work of healing from colonial witchcraft is engaging in an intentional journey of self-craft. And part of that journey is interrogating and looking at names and all ideas that we have received about who we are, tracing the DNA of these ideas, deciding if we choose to continue with these ideas, or then finding new names and new words to articulate who we are. And so I'm so excited today to continue this work with my sekuru, Mofu, Dr. Mhoze Chikowero, who is professor of history at the University of California, Santa Barbara, as well as with my dear friend, Dr. Tawanda Chabikwa, who is a professor of dance and Africana studies at the University of Texas, El Paso. So what we really hope for today is for it to be a community conversation. Saka please nyorai muchat ivaine mubvunzo ngationgorore ngatinyatsobvunza mibvunzo yakadzama tinyatsoona kuti ko chiko chinonzi muShona tiri vashona here vanoti he ndiri muShona chiko ichocho. So let's really go in. We welcome conversation, we welcome feedback, and at this point I'm going to hand over to my Sawira, my mkoma Tawanda.
Mangwanani, maskati, maneru, depending on where you are. My name is Tawanda, and I will be your moderator for this conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of context for this gathering, Revisioning Zimbabwe, which is part of a series, and today, who are the Shona? Now, this gathering emerges from the recognition of the persistence of this misnomer or this wrong name, Shona, that is generally accepted now in global use when referring to a specific Zimbabwean demographic. But when one takes a second look, they discover that the history of the term is deeply intertwined with the colonial project of the British. And this idea of the fabrication, this making up of ethnicities was and still is designed to create a very particular and disempowered colonial subject, one that is more manageable and exploitable. And sadly, this title, Shona, has continued to influence our thinking as Vanwe Zimbabwe and sustained a misguided concept that we continue to pass on to younger generations. So this conversation that we're having today, it really tries to interrogate the colonial history surrounding this misnaming of Black Africans. Where did it come from? How did it happen? And it also investigates the vast implications of what this misnaming does. What are its effects on us today, as we're living, whether in Zimbabwe or as global citizens around the world. So with the help of the expertise of Sekuru Mhoze, our Zimbabwean historical scholar, as our informed facilitator for today, hopefully all of you as participants will have the opportunity to cultivate deeper self-knowledge as individuals, as professionals, as creatives, and as parents, and as friends, and whatever your many roles are in life. And also the opportunity to liberate your minds and shift your relationships to yourself in your work, in your communities, as you continue to fulfill your own life purpose. And as has already been said, we'd like for this to really be a community conversation, to deepen knowledge, to build knowledge together with this facilitation that's happening. So in the beginning, Sekuru Mhoze is going to get a little bit into the history and share his knowledge and experience concerning the subject. As he's talking, I highly encourage everyone to make use of the chat box. If something comes up that's not clear, if something strikes you as interesting, we'll be monitoring the chat box, myself and Wongai and Tanyaradzwa, and myself as the moderator will, draw from that chat box if something needs to be expanded by Sekuru Mhoze to engage him in that way and things of that nature. So feel free to make use of that chat box, not just for questions, even for comments. It's okay to have these parallel conversations. And Sekuru is going to talk for, 30 minutes, and I'll be in there with him. And then afterwards, we're going to open it up to questions in general. Hopefully by the end of the conversation, or through the conversation rather, we'll be able to connect these historical ideas surrounding the term Shona to our contemporary lives today. So one of the things we were hoping to achieve is to understand the really vast and deep implications that this conversation has, because it might just seem like it's just a word, but what is the power of a word? What is the power of a name? And that's really what we're trying to get into. And believe you me, that's always been a strange sentence for me. Believe you me, when I first came across this information, it blew my mind and it changed my conception of who I am in general. So we're hoping to have a little bit more of that happening. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Sekuru to begin the process for us. So thank you again and welcome. Let's go for it.
Thank you so much. Kwazwai Messi, Mambano, Chidembo ndechako, nitabatswa chidembo chisiri changu, mzukuru wangu Mambano. When there is a skunk that's troubling her, as always, she tends to toss it to me. And this is my role as a Sekuru. I accept that. I accepted this one rather reluctantly because once the Chidembo has been tossed, you have no option. You have got to deal with it. Samaita, Tawanda, thanks for introducing the stingy skunk. Thanks for framing it so well. Tawengwa, mzukuru wangu mkuru.
Makadiko.
Inotamba yedu mzukuru makadivi.
Makadi mofu.
Yedu, kursegu musha.
Aiwa tiri nani. Kuri kupisa takutarisira mvura.
Mvura ngaye naye.
Ewe.
Ngaye naye tiwane kupona.
Kasa Sekuru.
Ndizvozvo.
Okay.
Kanukai, Simba, Vachira, Rejeko, Fry, Tanyaradzwa, another Vachira, nevamwe vose. Mirirai, Magadi zvenyu. Indogara batizo nepa airport. Makanzova noise, ask me to close my windows. Okay, so today I've been asked to handle this mischievous skunk, which I will also call a colonial dog collar, because if you go to Nigeria, if you go to Kenya, if you go through all these African countries, African identities are very, very powerful things, like other people's identities elsewhere. But especially so in Africa, these identities tend to be framed around the concept of ethnicity. Ethnicity is a rather benign way to put it across, because there are other less benign ways of talking about the same thing, the same identities. Ethnicity or tribe. The idea of tribe is used with so much resonance, so much power, and the power is deployed with so much impact in our on our continent, in our communities. Doesn't matter where. This is part of the outcome and part of the process that was willed in the process of the construction of particular identities during the last 2 centuries, mostly from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, by the people who, in many ways, produce the kind of knowledge that we have inherited today. We've inherited this knowledge, in most cases, without questioning it enough. To a good degree, we have questioned this. There's a history of interrogation of received knowledges, because one of the key points that we should always reflect on is that regimes of governance produce particular forms and kinds of knowledge for purposes of administration, for purposes of domination, for purposes of governance. If you look at writings by scholars like Bernard Cohn, for example, in his book, Colonialism and its Forms of Knowledge, subtitled The British in India, you see that the British, for example, had done the very same kinds of things that they did later on in Zimbabwe. The very same things. Any regime of colonial invasion first and foremost seeks to understand the targeted populations for purposes of reducing them into subjects for governance and exploitation and subjugation. Because the wisdom is that you can barely exploit and rule over and subjugate that which you don't understand, that which you don't know. So colonialism is first and foremost knowledge colonialism, or knowledge colonization, which basically involves a lot of misunderstanding, misknowing, mislabeling, misnaming. Because first of all, the colonial project seeks to delimit that which is being colonized. It seeks to map that which is being colonized, the terrain, the landscape, the flora and fauna the vegetation, the animals, the minerals, the economic drive for the system to begin with. But also the beings. I'm saying beings, not humans, because the Colonial Project did not really regard us as humans, which betrays its agenda. It sought to reduce us into infra-humans, into that which is sub-human. And it did that through various ways. And one of the outcomes was to name us, give us an epithet for a name. The Colonial Project seeks to conduct censuses. Who is here? What is here? What are the names? What are the languages? What are the genders? What are the gender philosophies? What are the gender relations? How do people relate? All these things are very, very important to make the colony legible. The British knew this when they came to Zimbabwe, but they kind of did not take their own wisdom seriously. So they didn't do that sufficiently until after they were surprised by these people whom they would later on call the Shona, when they rose up, took up arms and fought them, because they told themselves that the Shona, these people that they would call the Shona, are a very grateful tribe. They're a docile tribe. They are non-warlike, unlike their tormentors, the Matebele. So they're very grateful for our arrival here. Protect them. We're going to protect them against the warlike Ndebeles, another colonial construction of an identity. And so they disregarded that. They didn't really seek to understand the history of our people until they were surprised by the very well organized manner in which people rose up and fought in the misnamed first Chimurenga. It is misnamed because it was really not the first Chimurenga in our conception of these wars of self-liberation. That Chimurenga of the 1890s was not the first, because we had fought similar wars against similar people. Maputukezi. We had come to our region in the 1400s, end of the 1400s, traveling on the west coast of the continent, trying to settle, but also to acquire supplies on their way to India. So they tried to settle at the tip of the continent, which would later on become known as the Cape of Good Hope. They were hopeful that they would settle there. Then they started to pillage. First of all, they started by trading with the various groups that would be called the Khoisan. Then they thought, well, why should we buy these things available? The animals, the fresh water, the vegetables. The land was so fertile, very attractive. So they began to pillage, organizing commandos, raiding these communities. But they were beaten up, they were chased from the land to the extent that they changed direction altogether. Instead of sailing on the west coast of the continent, they began to sail on the east coast. And there they were beaten up also by East Africans, and they would really sail direct to India until the 1500s, when they used gunpowder and began to conquer the city-states like Kilwa, Malindi, Mogadishu, all the way down to Sofala in Mozambique. They used the power of those weapons, as did the Dutch, who would eventually subjugate the so-called Khoisan. So we had a deep experience of engagement with Europeans. So our first series of Chimurenga were really fought in the 1700s against the Portuguese, who were also enslaving Africans. So they began to have incursions into the Mutapa, going all the way to Zimbabwe, Makuru, which people call the Great Zimbabwe, which they documented in their writings, in their communication with their king back in Portugal, reporting in their journals. So there's a series of documents that scholars like Stan Mudenge has used in his book. That's appearing. This is one of his writings. The political history of the Mutapa. Utilize some of these documents to write about these interactions. So their power was revolved around the gun, but also their deployment of religion, Christianity specifically, seeking to convert Mutapa. They succeeded to the degree that they took some of the Mutapa princes to India back in the 1600s. The idea was to use education and Christianity to penetrate African societies, which the British would do later on. So we fought, we defeated them. They went back. Zimbabwe was to a good degree insulated from these enslaving excursions.
Sekuru,
really devastated.
There's a quick question. Kuti Maputukezi here ndivo vainzi vanhu vasina mabvi here, the people without knees? Tanfurusa has asked that question. And also, could you clarify what is the modern day Mutapa region? Just those two ideas.
Mutapa, if you think about the boundaries, our idea of boundaries and borders has been so much distorted by what this one, Osnama, brought in their modalities of governance. Chaiti isusu territory chinhu chakatosiyana nemaboundary atira kuti isusu this is a boundary of a state or an empire, but there are regions, and in many ways these regions were governed by Masvikiro and Mondoro, Zematunu. So you can think in terms of spiritual boundaries. And if you look at our identities, they transcended physical geographies in their interrelations. So that to kind of maybe get into the whole idea of language, which is really the main subject for our discussion today. Our languages were spoken intelligibly across these regions. Because if you look at the Mutapa state, it was an offshoot, like many other offshoots of Zimbabwe state systems, which were spread all the way from eastern Botswana, Botswana today, through western Mozambique, covering parts of Zambia and South Africa. So all these are Zimbabwe. If you think about the so-called Great Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, you find a smaller structure that's built in the very same way. Basically, it was called Zimbabwe. They said, Dombo Shava, Botswana, you find the very, very same. Limpopo province, Kumapungubwe, Zimbabwe, say why. So what are boundaries? So that's a really, really important question. Vasnamavi, there is a mistranslation of Vasnamavi. I know Zimbabweans say people without knees. To say one white figure matraus. I refuse that that translation. It's a mistranslation. I find I've used what I think is a conceptually more useful translation, which is a lazy people. A lazy people who behaved as if they have no knees to get down and do their own chores. And so their political economies were defined by pillage, by plundering, by rapine. Wow,
thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. I was just saying that's beautiful because the Kazhinji, we use these terms and we've lost the meaning already, you know, of it. So that's wonderful. Yeah, but go on.
We've
please.
lost the meaning. Yes, we have lost the meaning, but we also must realize that we're in a conundrum where we are called on to simply accept given meanings without asking who made those meanings, who defined terms for us, who defines knowledge for us. Because as Mahmoud Mamdani writes in his book, what's the title of the book? He argues that whoever defines rules, because to define is to rule, to name is to rule. So which was really the first modality of colonial governance, which was mapping geographies and terrain, but also our languages. So in terms of the languages, what we have inherited is another very curious creature. When the British came, they found us in our diverse cultures internally intelligible in our various traditions and knowledge systems. They found what they felt was the Tower of Babel. And they decided, well, we need to reduce these communities, remap them, recreate them, rename them. And what we got was this thing called the Shona. Before the 1930s, before 1930 specifically, there was nothing called Shona. Shona is a colonial invention. It is a colonial invention of the colonized identity and language. Because when they came, if you look at the documents of the British South Africa Company, which was the commercial company government at the same time, you find them when they came, they would enumerate in their census modality, who are the people who live here. By other people also, because people don't always name themselves because it's not always necessary. So they would list in this region, you find this tribe, the Matebele, you find a huge clustering of these people whose language is internally intelligible. And they would list the Bujra, the Kore, and all these. And they really needed to club these people together for purposes of reducing their language to a particular governance language. And one name that stuck with them was Shona. But they were not sure where the word Shona came from. It's a language that they had, especially from the Ndebele communities. That's if you trace the origins of the word Shona, that's kind of how they got to pin it down. But Shona really did not have a meaning. So from among the Ndebele people, one of the explanations was that, well, these are the people who would hide. They would Shona. My Ndebele is not perfect, but they would hide. They would hide against the occasional raids and battles and wars. Why disappear? Or again in the Ndebele Zulu languages, I think the idea of Shona Malanga, the people of the West, I understand, but the sense of geography does not agree with that explanation, because the so-called Shona people inhabited really in their predominance, not the West, but the eastern side, what the British called the muShona land province, vis-a-vis the Matebele land, western provinces. And so they really also try to find all kinds of explanations. The Ndebele would use the idea of Shona also as an epithet, not really as Shona, but as Shina, because the colonial administrators, they had, or at least they tell us that they had, that this is a word that means dead China. I don't know if the Ndebele, if they are really the origins of this idea, were cleaner than the so-called Shona. And so it's an epithet that really then assumes currency in the process of knowledge codification and standardization, because the missionaries, first and foremost, who were the pioneers of the witchcrafting project, they were put in the forefront in terms of what the British called the native education policy, because the missionaries were interested in converting Africans, converting them so that they conquer them culturally and spiritually for empire. That's why the British put the missionaries at the forefront. The wisdom was that you can conquer people with guns, but you are never going to subjugate them until you have disarmed them culturally and spiritually. And so missionaries really became useful and cheaper. If you read Rhodes' accounts, they're cheaper than policemen and soldiers. You conquer them softly until they've internalized these ideas that, well, their cultures are nothing. There are people who have no conception of God. They are hidden people, they're backward people, they are mere tribes. The idea of tribes denotes primitivity and barbarism and backwardness and undeveloped people. And so again, these are really the bundle of colonial ideas that sought to conquer a people psychologically, spiritually, culturally. And then in the 1920s, the British hired this guy, Francis Dock, who had done similar work among the Zulu people in South Africa, to come and codify and develop an orthography of the so-called Shona language that the missionaries would use in the missions, but also because the missions were also the schools. Yeah, so mission stations were schools. And so they needed a script, and that was part of the process of inventing the so-called Shona tribe and the so-called Shona language, which became, through the various process of writing and the dictionary making, became known as standard Shona, which is what we were forced to teach, taught in primary school once in Mhoze. Fundisai standard Shona. So my experience in teaching primary school in Zimbabwe was quite revealing, because that standard Shona did not really jive with what people spoke, the kind of variety of the language that's spoken in Mhoze. So you'd go around
Yeah, Abba Sekuru, what I find fascinating is basically, first my mind was blown. Prior to the 1930s, Papasna Chin, Chinonzi Chishona. The word had floated around here and there, but it wasn't an actual identity or an actual language. Saka uyu murumu wa muri kutaura, when I think you switched to sharing your screen, yes. Murumu uyu Doc wa muri kutaura was actually hired to create these identities. I think that point really needs to sink in for us. Kuti pane munhu akashedzwa kuti audze vanhu who they are, and that's fascinating. And
yes.
Kuti, this was done at the expense of the rich diversity of language, culture, and expressions of Black Africans who were already in the space. But also, interestingly, back to that idea, Kuti, the one who names, or naming is an act of power, rather. Yes. And it's very clear, Kuti, izvi zvaitwa for the benefit of the colonial project to make governance easier.
Yes.
So it's a paradoxical project, pakuti first it creates a group called the Shona, but at the same time it also creates a bundle of groups called tribes. Saka paneka paradox karkuitika kekuti
Yes.
you cannot rule a unified people, but we were unified in our diversity. So they had to undo our unification and enhance our diversity in order to separate us. Ha?
Yes. Yes. That is the paradox. That is the paradox. So if you read this report of the creation of this thing called Shona, the standard Shona language, this has been redone and commented on by Professor Chimundu, one of the Zimbabweans who now take on this project of codifying things, taking on from the colonial heritage. But what is of interest here, if you read this, you see the process of the making of the language. Even my letters, the debate, do we use this one, do we use the Roman system or not? Because our sounds didn't always find expression in the Roman alphabet. And so they would go around in communities, sound is a very, very powerful thing. We're listening to that Mbira song. I went to Zimbabwe and came back listening to that song. So language sound is very, very powerful. They would go around in my gadgets, such my instruments, testing. This sound, how does the tongue behave? Where does the sound implode from? Is it the cheek? What does the cheek do? What you measure, what you know past my sounds and finding letters for that. So it was a science of the making of languages. But I would like to go through, you can see some of these things. What is the perfect symbol for da? Over time, they would come with what we now use. But I want to go to page 28 to really talk about, to emphasize the idea of the Shona and its absurdity. So here is, I would like to read this excerpt. The term Shona, before Doc's report of 1931, Karanga had been used by some writers as a collective term since the days of contact between the Shona-speaking people and the Portuguese. As I said, my Portuguese had been coming to our region from the 1400s. So this is attested to by colonial European writers, travel writers. The last usage was possibly, again, in this book by one missionary, Francis Macones, a grammar of Central Karanga. Now, what is Central Karanga? The language of old Monomotapa, at present spoken in Central Mashonaland. Today, we imagine a so-called tribe called Karanga and mistake it for people who come from the region of Mashingo. That is the heritage that politicians in our governance system like so much, because they can perpetuate the division, the division to divide and rule. Central Karanga, this is Central Zimbabwe. Where there was one of the biggest missions involved in this process of colonial language making. It was Doc who formally recommended the use of the collective term Shona for the purpose of sub-dialects that he had identified in his comprehensive survey and had grouped under the terms Zezuru. Listen carefully. That he had identified in his comprehensive survey and had grouped under the terms Zezuru, Karanga, Korekore, Manyika, Ndau. In so doing, Doc was acting on the recommendations of the language committee, made up of missionaries. That was composed of missionaries who had been appointed by the government to assist him. Doc stressed that a common term was needed for use with reference to the unified language that was spoken by the vast majority of Africans in the country. Admittedly, the Shona speaking people did not have a collective term to refer to themselves. But this is them interpreting. They've forgotten already what they said above about the Karanga in Portuguese documents. They prefer to identify themselves by their clans, Madzinza, totems, Mitupo, and chiefdoms, Ushe, which existed in loose and perpetually expanding confederacies that nonetheless clearly belonged to a common ancestry, language, and culture. This is Doc, he's writing this in 1931 in one of his publications. The language varieties that were identified by the missionaries and Doc as dialect clusters and sub-dialects did not actually belong to any political entities or chiefdoms as such, and although there were describable patterns of distribution, there were no strict geographical boundaries between them. The etymology of the word Shona is unclear and could very well have started as a derogatory term coined by outsiders. But after Doc's report, it was readily accepted. And today, well, who accepted it readily? Not us. And today, its unifying effect is well appreciated. By who? Well, eventually by us, because it was foisted down our throats. Now that's what comes out of our throats. Decades of publishing in Shona under the name Shona, as well as its official use in education, in the media, have led to general acceptance of the term. Attempts after 1980 by oral historians Mhoze Chikowero, Solomon Mchairo to promote the term Mbire as a possible substitute for Shona were quite unsuccessful. Kind of celebratory right there. You can see how other languages were broken and alienated from this so-called Shona, like Kalanga, for example, which is the same Karanga. It is a spelling that the missionaries gave us, replacing R with an L right there. Doc's recommendation not to apply unified Shona to the Kalanga or Western Shona group of dialects was based basically on two arguments. That this dialect cluster had been physically separated from the other 5 clusters and now fell in the administrative province of Matabeleland. And that, although it definitely belonged to Shona, it now had too many features that were peculiar to itself. Well, like any language, languages vary with regions and you know. Among the examples of such features that he noted was the use of lateral L instead of the raw or trio R, and the absence of the implosive B and D. Ba, da. They would say D, or they would say dombo shawa, we would say dombo shawa. That's how the Kalanga speak. When they talk, they're not different from people speaking from other regions where the so-called Shona language is spoken. So this is really an outcome of colonial administrative considerations in the making of tribes. Because these people spoke these languages again in what is now called Matabeleland. There were a lot of people there before the Ndebele state was established in the 1840s. So where did those people go?
Disekuru, that is very brilliant. And as always, you know, nguva inoita majeras kana zvinhu zvakufamba as it goes, you know. But with this seed, you know, just to give people a few questions, time for some questions so that vanofanira umhanya havo. Given this context yamatipa, tisati tapinda mumubvunzo, I was curious kuti, and I think you've said it muchitaura, but what is the importance of knowing this history of the production of this chinchinonzi Shona? How does that affect us today mukugara kwedu? And vazhinji vedu on this call tirimo mudiaspora, you know, how does that change our idea of who we are? Why is it important to know these things and things of that nature. And I think, you know, some of this has come up in other conversations that we've had, you know, before this call as well. But just in closing, to kind of turn this into a nice little seed, tisatapinda mumvunzo, I was just curious, kuti connected to chimurenga chefungwa and hunhu hwedu, what it means to be a person in a global world today, you know, how does this information inform that?
I think this kind of knowledge, which I would like us to really pin down and flesh out. I've not written anything on this. I wish to do that when I find the space for it, because I think it's very, very important. It emphasizes several lessons that we should not take language. We should not take something called education for granted. And especially when things are defined for us by other people, because we inherited this thing that we call the school system. Where did it come from? And what was its purpose? Was it there to serve us? Did we invent it? Was it really to do something good for us or not? We need to ask those questions. And so what this really tells us, this idea of identity as a very, very powerful governance instrument. It can be used as a tool to do anything that you want with a people. It can be used as an instrument to build. It can be used as a weapon to destroy. Rwanda, you can see one of the key outcomes of this kind of colonial ethnogenesis. Vanhu vakupondana vachinzi iwe uri muhutu iwe uri mututsi. The languages of those two so-called groups are the same, cultures the same. The colonizers would go to the degree of measuring noses and the shapes of noses, and they use that language, that flattened noses, the kind of European language that thickened people's lips. Thick lips, flat nose. No, it's not the nose that is flat. It's the colonizing language that is flattening the nose. That is the violence of these colonial fathering languages. And we cannot come from a departure point of simply accepting. We must first of all reject, refuse, interrogate, and deconstruct. Because today, kumusha, kana tawana zvinhu zvinotinetsa sevanhu, hauna paunombozonzwa kuru vachiti hande timbonoita chishona, timbobika doro rechishona, hakuna zvinhu zvakadaro. Kune doro rechikaranga, doesn't matter where you are. So very, very important. So are we still the children of our ancestors, or are we now the children of these missionaries and the colonial project, culturally and intellectually? We need to free ourselves. It's very, very important, I mean, for people living outside of Zimbabwe. Sometimes it takes you, it takes that stepping away from what you take for granted to really begin to want to understand what you are. So, who are you? Diaspora, very quickly say Shona. You reinforce the colonial dog collar. Chituko. It is chituko ere. Kana kuti hazvisina basa ere, kana kuti zvikata basa zvine basa rei here.
Ndizvo zvimwe zvakandinakidza pataitaura sekuru makati saka wakapiwa zita rembwa wakuzvisvedza nezita rembwa. The term Shona is a colonial dog collar. I love that image. And of course, you know, once you're wearing that dog collar, it's hard to know who you are. And when you don't know who you are, that means you are alienated from yourself. And when you're alienated from yourself, you cannot become fully self-realized as a human in the world. And colonialism. But shall we move into pane mvunzo yavunzwa partly during the talk you were giving, and I'm sure people will come up with some others, but right now Simba anga ine mubvunzo waakanda muchitaura, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit. And other people, as this is happening, you can type more questions, or there'll be time to unmute and so forth as well, just for the next few minutes. Let's just open up this space. But Segur, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Simba, go ahead. I will.
Yes, Sekuru Mhoze, thank you for thank you for blessing us with your knowledge. And you know, there's a lot to process, and there's a lot to think about. But halfway through your talk, I was wondering what the role of the Ndebele and other tribes, other groups in within the borders of Zimbabwe at the time, or even outside of the borders. Because most of the time we think of, I guess we think of like the Chimurenga as only being fought by a certain group of people, but I'm really wondering what the role of the Ndebele, the role of other groups outside of Zimbabwe was in the fight for freedom.
Thanks, Gara. Thanks, Gara. You're asking about Chimurenga Chakaunza Zimbabwe in 1980. Am I right?
Both the first Chimurenga and the second.
Okay, I see. Okay. The history there is really yet to be written. And it's a very beautiful thing that the history is yet to be written. Over a century since that Chimurenga, 1890. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing because we can now write that history. Also the archive is all over the place. We can track down the archive of Chimurenga. The desire for freedom, for self-liberation, was not limited to a particular group of people. There were all kinds of politics in the quest for self-liberation that gave complexity to how the wars were fought at different points, different times, on different days. So that we have something that is called collaboration. Kune vanhu even vakatarisa Chimurenga chekuma 1970 masoja echitema anga akawanda muhondo yerudhizha kukunda varungu. More than 80% of Smith's soldiers were some of us, black people. The same is true if you look at hondo dzairwiwa kuma 1700s, even 1600s, vana Queen Nzinga vachirwana nemaPortuguese ku Congo, Angola. Vatema vanga vakawanda, varungu hapana pavaimbozotikurira datakabatana savanhu vatema. But more than 80% invariably were Africans fighting other Africans in the interest of the colonial project. So that at independence, Mozambique, Samora and Jakatangane, this so-called truth and reconciliation idea that was adopted with fanfare in South Africa. It's not going to Chimurenga. It's takati racial reconciliation, national reconciliation policy. But you can only reconcile things that were reconciled first to begin with. Were we ever together? How do we reconcile things that were never reconciled? There's a book that is coming. Let me mention it. Some of you may know Nyashamboti. One of my youngsters is publishing a book that will change a lot of things that we take for granted about colonial studies. His book is called Apartheid Studies, a Manifesto. One of the most powerful books that I've read in a long time. It's in 4 volumes, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume 4. I spend the whole week, Monday to Friday, reading it, doing nothing else. Then we had a workshop on the book. Fantastic. What it tells us about the role of specifically what you call the Ndebele. Again, if you read Doc's report, Ichuchaton's Ndebele Church is also in question. Ndebele was a construct. Because, I mean, the Ndebele state had its own particular politics of assimilating, but also marginalizing those people that were found there in the 1840s. Pakauya, the Dutch and then the British, the Ndebele state, I mean, there were diplomatic back and forth engagements to try to cut deals as people try to survive in states. You see the same thing, I mean, in Swaziland, in Lesotho, all kinds of places. One of the key things that defined the politics was the idea of survival. When people realized the calculative power of the European cannibals. They came like Marwaif. The British were more calculative, really like Marwaif, as Lobengula tells us when he says, have you ever seen a chameleon catch a fly? It does not rush like a lizard, which is what the Boers were trying to do, and the Portuguese were trying to do. They were lizards, and they were beaten back by the Khoisan and others. The British were more calculative, but slowly, using missionaries, until they were within reach, and the chameleon darts its tongue, and the fly disappears. So Lobengula was approached as if he were a fly, and he was a fly. He became a fly. He failed with the diplomatic calculations. In the process of trying to cut deals with the British and the Dutch and others, he would sell a people that he did not rule over, such as the so-called Shona. He never really ruled over the so-called Shona, Makaranga, Isuwa Karanga. But in the process of diplomatic calculations, so that even Pakaponda Ishene Makonde, by these missionaries, his answer was that Makonde is my dog, he's my slave. He's my dog, he's mine. So he could do what he wanted. So he was in many ways as a ruler. I'm not talking about the Ndebele as a people. As a ruler, he was like a chameleon himself. But there became a more calculative chameleon that reduced him into a lizard. That's how they chased him out of town, as they ride like a god. So politics of unity and disunity. So that you see the army detachment that chased him out of town like a god was constituted by people from what the British would call the Fort Victoria district, the Victoria natives, as the British would write. They constituted a good part of the army because Lobengula would go there and raid and raid and raid. So there were already pre-existing politics there. But today, if you look at those people, we call them Matenges. We are not really looking at the politics of the time. But so the British were very much interested in foisting and reinforcing these bifurcations, these divisions. But pakazoya hondo after even Lobengula atandaniswa zvimirenga zvairwiwa zvicoordinatwa kubva kumatopo kumabwadziva matombo nana Mukwati Ncube ndokwavaibva ikoko vachienda chinosangana namashaya mombe vachipfuura nekwana Chwashira kwana sekuru vangu vachibatana vachironga hondo nana nehanda kumazowe kugombako. Because I mean these were the polities that we really used. How do you define a state becomes the key question. Political national disasters can have in Msadmari Maziais. people would be sent kumatombo, kusingapwe mvura, kumadziva, kunotaurana nemusiki. Ikoko ndikwaenda nembeu dzavo dzonouchikwa, dzosanganiswa, dzotumirwa kumatunhu. You are making a state that way. You're also ensuring food security. Now start with GMO because we abdicated our role to Europeans. Now they're destroying us using food.
Yeah, and it's a good.
Too many things.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. It's, you know, yeah, you know, it's sad to learn these things, but it's good to know these things, you know, and that's new knowledge in a very deep way. And partly, pane muvunzo wavunzwa na Tan Furusa, I don't know if you'd like to expand, kana uchiripo, but this idea of who are the actual chiefs, who are the actual leaders. We know that the colonizers had this habit of instilling their own forms of leadership. And I thought it was a good time to ask this question because you already mentioned that idea of how leadership or state is interpreted differently based on period. What we call a state now and the politics of now, we try to overlay those onto our histories. Yet, like you exemplified, the polities and state were constructed from a very different worldview in that time, you know, so we can't imagine chiefs, presidents, and whatnot. And that's part of the thing that colonizers did. Now, this is the chief, and they'll give them the same role as a minister or a parliamentarian in England, not respecting this. But who then are the legitimate chiefs? You know, Tan Furusa said, I have heard that chiefs are the product of colonial collaborators. So who are the legitimate chiefs?
Yeah, so now imagine that angatiri ku ameno this space kwarari chitaura nyaya yakaita sebvunza wakadaro people say about our politics kavanava.
Yeah.
What is politics? I mean, and what is not politics? So that's really very, very important. 2 years ago, I was looking for notebooks. Letters and notebooks. I've taken notes over the years on this destruction of African political systems. A project that started really with my research for a project that I'm doing on the biography of my ancestor, Tanyaradzwa Tawengwa. Vakachekwa yongwa yezvimurenga zvekuma1890 nemabhuniwa. Soro avo uri kuEngland, kana pana ari kuEngland, angona ndibatsirawo kunotora chanotora. He is one of the so-called chiefs. I mean, what is a chief also? These are the colonial languages that we have got to be worried about. So ushe hwaChwashira hauna wakabva watodzimwa from that point, because Chwashira ndiwe vamwe vakatora zvombo vakarwisa mabhunu kuma1890. Ushe hwaChingaira, shamwari yangu Comrade Chings would sing kuti ndo zvamakuita mazuva ndo unonzi kutonga nechirungu. Yes, that song where he says vana veZimbabwe musazotonga nechirungu. Nhasi takutonga nechirungu. Kutonga nechirungu kuita sei? It's something that really has exercised my mind for a long time. Unfortunately, I didn't ask him that particular question. But it simply means we adopted and perpetuated the Westminster system. Even vanhu vakanzi ndovakati vatungamiri pa-independence kubva mazuva ekupera kwechimurenga chekuma1970s. Vanhu vaitaura chirungu. Pandakasvura wrong time, ndakatotaurawo chirungu. But you're raising a question of leadership. What is leadership? Pavakadzoka kuhondo, vakatonga nechirungu. They didn't go back to people who had sent them, who had deployed them. Vana baba vangu inini vakaenda kuhondo, vasati vaenda, vakabata matare. Usiku hwese vachirova mbavarira yaChwashira. Vandodzambira nziya that song, Imbavara yachwashiri, rwiyo rwasekuru vangu. Ndo rumbo rwaigadza madzishe irworwo. Vakarasuku vese vachirova mapira. Vachaura nevakuru, kunzi vasekuru takunosumudzira hondo iya yamakatanga. Kuchiedza, vachirova pasi kuenda kuMozambique, kuenda kuTanzania. Vakatumwa nevakuru in that sense. I talk about that in my Facebook chapters, maybe 8 and 9. Vachidzoka ikoko, vanga vasunga tai manje vafana vanga vatumwa kuchimurenga. Vanga pfeka savarungu. Vanga kutaura chirungu, vanga kutonga nechirungu. Mukatarisa even paindependence, pakaitwa munamato. Vana Patrick Chakaipa nemuzukuru wangu Ribeiro. Ndivakanyora munamato iyoyo, Father Ribeiro kuHighfields. So basically reinforcing the Rhodesian logic that the missionary is the more powerful, less expensive soldier to keep Africans under colonial shackles. So that what we call independence, as Nyashamboti argues, in many ways is a normalization of colonialism as an apartheid conception of rule by others, the reduction of others into these zombified beings who are now operate as cogs in this system that is meant for the production of colonial profit for the colonizers. And they don't see anything wrong with it now because it has been normalized through these racial constitutions, racial reconciliation constitutions. Reconciling people were never reconciled to begin with. So what was being reconciled was really a sanitization of Chidembo. Chidembo achanui, takutochifarira, Chidembo chinonaka, takusamudoi, no independence. So, I mean, I could talk about very briefly also the question of leadership and independence. Because independence, the struggle Chimurenga was a quest for self-rediscovery and recentering. Did we fully rediscover? Did we fully recenter? These questions were asked a little bit from the 1950s. They were not really pursued because what Fanon calls the native intelligentsia captured Chimurenga. They were now happy to just step into the shoes of the colonizer. Pakadzoka tsvimbo yaMukwati, nhonzo yenyika, 1997, kubva ku England. Yakadzorwa nemuchinda ari kumusha right now, who used to live in France. Akatumwa kuHope, and he saw this nhonzo yenyika and he had to go through Matare, Kumusha, and then he went and led people and extricated it from 1,000 other nhonzo like that one. And he brought it back home. Akati vakuru venyika ndaunza nhonzo emaster Teguru. Ndo nhonzo yafara kusimudza mibvunzo yatiri kutaura kuti mutungamiri ndani, independence zvinorevei. Vakatya nyaya iyoyo, vaitungamira nyika mazuva aya vakavhunduka. Dakuvhundutsa vanhu nenhonzo yakwe. Nhonzo iyoyo yakaiswa kuNational Museum. Zvakaitwa sekuru vangu inakaiswa kuNational British Museum. Vakatya kuibata because vanzi kana maiuya nayo modaidza Matare, moita izvi, mosuka nyika, mogadzirisa zvinonetsa vana, nyaya dzeutongi dzogadziriswa. Asi nekuti vainzi vatongi, vanga vasiriwo vatongi mumaziro edu nemaitiro edu, inyaya yakavavhundutsa. Maoko avo anzi vanga ari neropa. plus wanga asingazikanwi nziwe ndiwani saka yakangoputirirwa ikaiswa uko vanhu vakawanda havazivi nezvayo nyaya iyoyo.
And that's an important thing, you know, this idea of them, you know, the museumization of knowledge. And it happens on both ends, you know. Kuti ruzivo rwedu radzoka isai museum, you know. Misoro yemadziteteguru edu yatorwa iri kupi kumamuseum uko, rather than being for, with, and among the people. Saka zvadaro manje, so thank you very much. I would like to now just mukuvhara, just really if we, you know, go back to gallery view tichiona mazita evanhu vese nezvinhu zvakadaro, so we can see everybody and just try to sort of check out as we're opening up the floor. I know the time is never enough, such is life, but now you know where to find us, you know where to find Sekuru Mhoze for further questions and as a future series occur. But panga paine vanga vaine here zvavaida kutaura here, just to check out, just a few words. I always like to do that because we are humans, we are not in a Western lecture space. Just like we opened by acknowledging vanhu tichitaura mazita tichitenda, I just wanted to open up just for a minute or two. Kana paine vanga vaine pfungwa dzavanga vainadzo here, or something to say to Sekuru or about the panel, that would be great.
Hi, I just want to know if I can have a whole semester of this because simply not enough time. Maybe I need 5 years, I don't know, but thank you.
Well, join my seminar. I'm teaching a seminar now. It's open. I'm teaching a seminar on African self-liberation. It's there are some people not even students.
Oh, really?
Wonderful. Please share that information. Please share.
Yes, I would join.
Yes. The first time hearing about it. See, this was great. Thank you for asking that, Christine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Indeed. And other folks, this is just opening your heart and mind. Just to acknowledge kuti tangatiri pano tese. Vanoda kuombera vanoombera. Vane mibvunzo vane mibvunzo. But how is everyone doing?
Sekuru Mhoze, I think, you know, when you were talking and you were explaining some of the, especially when you talked about Sinama V, I literally had shivers. And I think it's because there's something internal about the ancestors in us that always tries to be heard. And we never really have the right tools to speak to our ancestors, but the voices are always there. So I think it's in moments like these where you realize that connection. It may not be as significant, but it's there. It's like a spark. So I think, you know, I really want to say thank you, Mazita Sekuru, for just imparting this piece, and I would love to hear more. And because the questions, they still keep coming. Maybe not on this platform, but as we go along.
No, thanks, Furusa. Thanks, Furusa. But just in half a minute to reinforce that point. Now, if you really look at it, what we hear from us as African people everywhere. There's a crisis in Zimbabwe, for example, today. What exactly are they talking about? People who are asking for jobs. So it's a very curious thing, really. What is called the crisis is a very, very curious thing. Mm-hmm. It says we don't care about the knowledge that got us to where we are. When we begin to talk the language of jobs, when we begin to imagine our species for animals as species that we would give to anybody who comes to dig for coal and to come to kill our animals willy-nilly. It says we don't care about the heritage of knowledge systems that produced us as colonial minions. Because as a people, we really never were a jobs people. We were engineered through colonial instruments and reduced into seekers of labor. We became labor, basically, not even laborers. We were reduced to an element of production, effect of production, which was built very methodically. Nasi, I have difficulties buying from TM. When I go to Miko's hotel, I have serious problems with it. Vasiguranga nondirambiza kupinda mashopi wayo because imombe dzavo dzakavaka mabusiness aThomas Miku dzakatorwa pavakauchekwa ipapo minda yavo unoona Featherstone. That whole estate is my ancestors' land. It's my land. Because the British constituted what they called a loot committee. If you go to early newspapers, another Chronicle Herald, you see the reports. Constituted through military generals and others and administrators, rounding up cattle and other wealth, and then dishing this out to themselves. The regular points. There were loot crows across the land. That's how they built the Rhodesian beef industry.
Wow.
That's how individuals build their businesses, including TM. That's how they built even, I celebrated last week when I saw one Zimbabwean, Akatanga, a brewery, producing something that is called Ngoto. I was very, very happy because I've been doing a little project on it, looking at how the British started their beer industry by destroying our beer industries. Vakatora marecipe ana mbuya vachaisa muchibhuku and gave us chibuku, the way we would drink that day of the week where we were not working for them, as an instrument of native administration and management in the cities. So colonial economies came to us as cannibal economies. They cannibalized us. Kuma mines, they discovered no new mine. They simply went to what they called old workings. Since the time I trade and Portuguese, Arab and others. So they brought nothing. So it pains me then when I listen to people talk about jobs and talking about foreign direct investment. Because Cecil John Rhodes was the biggest foreign direct investor in Zimbabwe. What did that give us? It reduced us into labor.
Sekuru, thank you very much. And for all those with their questions, thank you very much. And for your feedback, we are coming around to that wonderful time that is just enough amount of overtime for us to wrap it up, which is beautiful. And just sort of a thought that was motivating, my thinking, Dichiterera, is that idea of disorienting and alienating people from themselves. For myself, that's been a constant thing, scurrying about the world. And of course, when I left Zimbabwe, then I learned that I was Black. That was new to me. and the alienation from self has continued since then. So as I listen to these conversations, I find myself fighting from the depths of my being to return to who I am. I am tired of living a life in which I must go to other people's traditions to find my own value. And it rather than kuita chivanhu changu. And this is not to devalue other traditions at all. There's value in all. I can, yes, practice my Christianity, I can do my yoga, I can go to Reiki, I can have my zodiac beliefs and so forth, but there's a degree to which in those spaces I will always be alien. So I'm very grateful for all these conversations that empower me by reminding me of who I am and encouraging me to do the work of reconnecting to the power that is my legacy, the power that I have been alienated from. And and as we close up for this, I wanted to thank you, Sekuru, for being here, Wongai for having my back in the chat, Tanyaradzwa for bringing us all together and having my back in all these ways as the moderator and so forth. And for the exit, I'll turn it back over to Mambano to send us off in this way.
Sekuru. Totanga tichitenda papi. Chokwadi dai musipo Sekuru ka tingadai tichidzungaira. Ndo chokwadi chachona. Tinotenda neruzivo rwenyu, tinotenda nerudo rwenyu. Ndinozviziva kuti mune zvinhu zvakawanda zvekuita. Hatina chatinokwanisa kukupai, hapana chandingati oi Sekuru ichi. Asi ndinongokupai rutendo. Ndichitendoona mbuya wangu Angela. Ndoziva kuti ranga riri birthday rawo nezuro. Saka mungadai muchitovabikira so muchivapa zvipo mbuya wangu achera. Asi iwa mbuya wangu wabvuma kuti mimi mumbotandara nesu masikati ano. Saka ndoda kutendoona nambuya wangu achera variko kuSanta Barbara. Thank you so much to everybody who joined in. I don't even know what to say. But hopefully, Sekuru, you know, we can continue because I'm sure like many of my peers and friends, we have so many questions and so many things that we're seeking for. And we're seeking for answers, you know? We're looking for water. We're really fish out of water. It has been so moving to bear witness to this Dandaro Dare, to see all of the faces that have come together. I'm so grateful. Kunevabereki vedu from the Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp, Tanyaradzwa namai Shamiso, namnesu. Imimi Sekuru, you know, you're connected to Christine Makanaka because Christine Dimai Makanaka na Dombo, they were in the same session for the Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp. So your kids connected, you know. Dr. You know, all of our members of the Zimbabwe Artists Collective who are here. Ndinongotenda kuti mauya anabonga anamasibanda ngara. I see you all. Samaita, of course. Achiera Mirirai, thank you. You know, Sister Wangu Tanyaradzwa, thank you for being here. I thank all of our friends. Negara, thank you for being here. Dotendo amai vangu, mama, ndlovu kazi, mandlovu. Ndotenda, mauya kuzondi tsigira inini mwana wenyu gotwe renyu. Thank you for being here, mama. In closing, I just want to share some links. So for those of you who are new, you know, this Zimbabwe Scholars Symposium is part of a larger Zimbabwe Artists Collective and also curated by the Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp. You know, the Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp is a kind of educational space I created over the summer, really thinking about how we can educate our children in the diaspora. And it became evident that it was not only the children that needed education, but also we, the parents, needed a re-education. So we started to offer this space as a space for relearning, for unlearning and relearning. We do this. Sekuru Mhoze is giving of his time. He's being generous, but he does have a book. My Sekuru has an incredible book called African Power and Being, African Music, Power and Being, exactly, in Colonial Zimbabwe. A lot of us have bought it from Amazon, but yesterday Sekuru says he doesn't get anything from Amazon and has asked that we buy it directly from him. So I am putting in the chat his email so that please get his book and get it directly from him. Keeping resources in our community is also a big part of this decolonial process of self-liberation. Saka, please contact Sekuru and get the book from him. I also want to say that we are growing as a camp, as a Zimbabwe KIDS Summer Camp, and so much of what we've been able to do has been through the generosity of our community. So if you too are feeling like you want to be generous towards our camp, I'm putting a link in the chat. You can please support our camp, support our children, and that it will allow us to continue to curate these series. You know, we've really been looking for elders. At our camp, we brought in Thomas Mkanya Mapfumo to talk to the children. You know, these are all things that we want to continue doing to really create these holistic and wholesome spaces. Another thing that came up in the chat was the need for a resources Google Drive. I have created a Google Drive, and in it I have the Clement Doak paper as well as the Lifebuoy paper that Nancy talked about. I'm about to share those links as well. So it's an open drive. You can just click on it and see the link. If you feel that there are any resources that this community should have, you can also upload to that drive called Chimurenga Chepfungwa. And finally, if you are new to our community and want to stay in contact, I have put our email. So these are all the links right here in the chat. I have put our email, zimbabweartists@gmail.com. Please email us. We'll put you on our list and keep you in the loop when we have this next iteration of this series. This is all I have to say. I will follow up with Sekuru about his seminar on African self-liberation and communicate with everyone how we can be in that class. I also want to share that Nontskelolo Mtiti has an incredible resource online called readingzimbabwe.com. It's in the chat. Please go there as well. Again, it's all about self-craft, about getting to know ourselves on our own terms. So Nduda Kungotenda again, thank you all for being here. Please be safe. For those who can, please vote. And Shungoramba Chungotenda, and we'll keep on with this work. Thank you so much, Sekuru. Thank you, Samaita, for being such an incredible moderator. Dinongotenda, I love you all. Thank you all for this community. Changoramba Mumshandira Pamwe. Thank you so much, everybody.
No, thank you. Thank you, Mambano, Samaita. Thank you, everyone. This is an important space. Keep doing more of this.
Okay, great. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.